Call of Duty World at War marks the 5th entry in the Call of Duty main franchise, and it's honestly one of my favourites in the series. Everything from the really immersive campaign, the absolutely outstanding multiplayer, and the terrifying zombies, Call of Duty World at War was quite a masterpiece and was one of Treyarch's first amazing COD games. However, as much as I could talk about literally everything in Call of Duty World at War and make a 10-hour long video, in today's video I really wanted to focus on how Call of Duty World at War portrays the horrors of war itself. Now, Call of Duty World at War is not like all of the COD games. A lot of Call of Duty games, including the older World War II ones, really fantasize war and make it seem like you're really playing as the good guys. However, Call of Duty World at War has a way more down-to-earth approach and shows you all of the horrors of war and how, even though you're fighting against awful people, sometimes you do awful things. From the Soviet Union throwing millions of soldiers into battle with basically no weapons, with little to no ammo and little to no experience, and American soldiers using flamethrowers against the Japanese. In Call of Duty World at War, you do technically speaking play as the good guys, but you do awful things that don't make the game seem as heroic as some of the Call of Duty entries. For example, the music in Call of Duty World at War very rarely makes you feel like a hero for very long. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of music in Call of Duty World at War that screams America Amazing USA, Donald Trump cheeseburger.
People like me from previous months, okay? Total control. Bing, bing, bong, bong, bing, bing, bing. You know what that is, right?
However, this is usually short-lived and followed with sad and more somber music. But anyway guys, this intro is a bit of a mess, so I'm going to clear things up real quick. This video is going to be set into 3 segments, and in each 3 of these segments we're going to be analysing different parts of the game, how I think they really portray the horrors of the Second World War. These 3 categories will be the audio design, the graphic design, and the gameplay design. But we're going to be starting out with my favourite, audio design. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe, get some popcorn, get ready to enjoy me waffle about a game that is actually almost 2 decades old. Jesus Christ, I'm starting to feel ancient. Now, in Call of Duty World at War, there are many aspects that go into the audio. Everything from the music, the atmospheric sounds, and the dialogue of the characters. All of these aspects play a really important role in truly showing the horrors of war in Call of Duty World at War. The first part of this section that I really want to talk about is the actual soundtrack itself. Now, for the most part in Call of Duty World at War, there aren't too many heroic songs that really make you feel like you're the good guy in this game. Especially when playing the Soviet Union, the songs that play in the background are in a way kind of menacing and make you seem like you're the bad guy. Because although you are killing the Axis army, you're also doing horrible, horrific things, such as shooting surrendering soldiers, lighting people on fire, and just showing overall merciless behavior. And the soundtrack really does do an amazing job at portraying this. The music is very slow and very haunting. You don't really get any amazing heroic songs. I mean, they do show up every now and again, but they're always very short-lived. The soundtracks in this game are also really amazing at matching the environment that you're in. For example, when fighting the Japanese, you often hear a lot more Japanese sounding songs with more sound cues that would kind of replicate what you would expect to hear in those kind of scenarios. Whereas when you fight in the Germans, it's a lot different. For example, around the map, when playing against the German army in the mission Ring of Steel, you see radios scattered across the map playing German songs that would have played at the time. And it really just gives you an idea of the force that you're fighting against when you hear these songs. Now, although I've been covering mostly the horror-based songs, there are also songs that kind of capture the intensity of the moment more than the horror element. Now, I know this video is mostly talking about the horror elements of this game. However, I feel like we should really cover some of the other soundtracks that are less horror-focused, as I feel like they really deserve to be talked about. The main one I want to focus on is the song Black Cats from the mission Black Cats. Now, this song isn't exactly horror-focused. You could definitely say it's not cheerful, but it's more of the intensity of the song that is just truly beautiful and truly matches the mission perfectly. The song starts off quite mellow. There's nothing too crazy happening, no crazy sounds, but as soon as you get into combat, the drums start kicking in and the tune gets extremely intense. the song kind of replicates the sound of gunfire coming towards you, and it really makes the situation a lot more intense and makes you realize how outnumbered you are and what an insane situation you're in. And it really just shows how amazing the developers of Call of Duty and the soundtrack were for being able to capture all of that intensity in one soundtrack. Now, I don't really want to talk about just the soundtrack too much, so we are going to leave that there. However, I could do a whole video just talking about the audio in this game, as it is absolutely amazing. However, now it's the time to start looking at the visuals of the game and how they impact the overall vibe and the overall immersion of the game. And one of my favorite missions to show this is the mission Vendetta. Now, inside the mission Vendetta, you start in a water fountain that's not only been blown to pieces and has no actual water running, but is also filled with bodies of your fellow soldiers. Any soldiers that aren't already dead are getting shot down by German soldiers. However, you manage to stay still enough for them to not notice and to leave you be, which leads to the mission Vendetta, where you meet up with Reznov and kill a lead in general. And honestly, this is just one of many, many examples in Call of Duty World at War that really just show the brutality of war and how merciless a lot of people were. Another thing you may notice in this game is the use of the flamethrower, a weapon that's banned in the modern day as it was too brutal for war. The flamethrower was a very slow killing weapon that would slowly burn people to death, and this is the main reason it was banned in current day. However, in World War II, this was not the case. And even if it was the case, most armies would have used it either way, due to the fact that it was honestly one of the best ways to clear out small areas and trenches. However, the brutality of this weapon was obviously something feared by any soldiers that had to come across it. Another thing you may notice in this game is that it's a lot less colourful than a lot of other Call of Duty games. And don't get me wrong, there are segments in this game with a lot of vibrance and a lot of color, but that mostly takes place in the Pacific War, where you're on a lot more beachy areas with a lot more sunlight. But when you play as the Soviet side and you're in Germany, you realize that it's kind of just a concrete jungle. The most commonly used color is gray, from all the buildings being gray to most of the vehicles being gray, and the German soldiers' camouflage as being gray. It's just a very bleak colored game with not many interesting things to look at. In my opinion, I think this color palette was chose to really portray the dark, grim nature of war and to show that there is no light at the end of the tunnel, and that most soldiers won't actually make it out of the war alive. One thing you'll also notice in this game is that they don't try to cover up the gore as much as more recent Call of Duty games. When using shotguns, limbs will go flying off. When using the flamethrower, people will be burnt into a black tar. This game is very brutal with its visuals, and we probably wouldn't see a Call of Duty game like this released nowadays due to the controversies it would cause and due to overprotective parents not wanting their kids to be scarred by a COD game. Instead, kids nowadays like to play as Halo Master Chief, hitting 90s on John Cena whilst hitting the griddy. The last thing I want to cover when talking about the visuals of this game is the fact that real-life war footage is often used in the cutscenes and the intro scenes before you start missions. Now, like I said earlier, modern COD games would never do this, but a lot of Nazi symbols and original war footage of people being killed and tortured and, mistreated is shown in this game, and it honestly shows the true horrors of war by literally showing you from the Second World War. And it's honestly quite a smart thing for the devs to do. And in some missions, they even blend animated footage with the World War II footage, and I think that's just really amazing. That investing people into playing the game. But yeah, honestly, other than that, guys, I don't want to go too much into the visuals either. This is an analysis video, but I don't want it to be too long, and I recommend if you want to see even more details and want to really immerse yourself in how this game shows the horrors of war, you should just go and play it yourself. However, there is still one segment we have to talk about in this video, and that's the actual gameplay itself. The gameplay of Call of Duty World at War is really damn interesting. In this game, you can go from fighting on foot, to fighting in tanks, to fighting in planes, and to having a lot of styles of on-foot gameplay that you just don't see in a lot of other COD games nowadays. Now, for the most part, when playing as the Soviet Union campaign, the German soldiers don't really act any different to your standard COD AI. For the most part, they just stand and shoot, sometimes go behind cover, and throw a few grenades every now and again, unless you're on Veteran, where they only throw grenades and bullets are secondary. However, when playing in the Pacific War in this game, when you play against the Japanese, you realize that the Call of Duty developers went really above and beyond into immersing you into the game and the scenarios that American soldiers would have had to face back then. Japanese soldiers don't just shoot you and do standard attacks. They'll do bonsai charges, bayonet charging you. They'll climb into trees and strap themselves to them and snipe you. They'll come out of the bushes doing ambushes and even use your own dead to trick you into another ambush. Now, that's just touching the surface. They also do a lot of other minor things which would kind of recreate how they would act back in war. For example, on the Black Cats mission, you'll see the Japanese pilots kamikaze flying into the American boats and dealing as much damage as possible. And the reason this is so damn cool of the developers is because it really makes you realize how horrific war would have been fighting against the Japanese as an American soldier. They fought to their last dying breaths, and sometimes they'd purposely kill themselves if it meant slightly damaging a friendly boat. You also get the typical turret sections in this game where you sit on a turret, shoot people. You obviously get to drive a tank at one point, but these aren't going to be talked about too much by me in this video because they're nothing too special. It's just your typical vehicle and turret sections really, with nothing too crazy happening. One thing you do notice about this game though is that the guns are quite crappy. At the end of the day, you're fighting in World War II and the guns haven't got the precision of modern day weaponry. You have a lot of bolt action rifles that are very slow and clunky to use and not always the most accurate. And although this game doesn't portray guns jamming and stuff like that, you do realize that ammo can also be quite sparse, especially on the guns that are provided to you at the start of missions. This game also introduces ever so slight stealth mechanics. I wouldn't really say stealth. The enemies usually know where you are no matter what. However, occasionally you're given an option to flank the enemy when they're unaware of you, or on some missions you're able to sneak around a little bit, like on the level Inviction. But at the start of the mission, you're forced to sneak around and ambush the enemy soldiers and stuff like that. But honestly, guys, I think that's everything I want to talk about in today's video. I really don't want to make this video too long because I know a lot of people have talked about Call of Duty World at War, and this video's a bit more of a test to see if you guys really do enjoy me making more analytic content, talking about games and how I portray them, you know, any cool features that they have. If you do enjoy this type of content on the channel, a like and subscribe would really be appreciated. I've been working on this video for a few days now and it's honestly been quite a fun project to work on. I'm very passionate about it and I really hope it turns out well and you guys enjoy it. I feel like we covered the three main segments of what makes this game so amazing at portraying the horrors of war. From the audio to the gameplay to the visuals, this game just really tells an amazing story and is honestly why it's one of my favorite Call of Duty games. I really do think Activision and Treyarch and Infinity Ward should all take notes from the older COD games because Call of Duty has honestly lost a lot of its identity nowadays. The developers really focus on the multiplayer and are really not caring about the campaigns as much. I mean, I know a lot of people still enjoy the campaigns in modern CODs, but they're nowhere near as amazing as they used to be, and they're too scared to portray the actual horrors of war like they used to. Now, I understand that when this game came out, games were a lot more brave and a lot more able to show stuff like this without as much controversy, but I feel like if developers just listened to what the COD fans want, they'd end up making games a lot more similar to the original COD World at War, Modern Warfare, and the more original COD games. Either way, guys, that's just my take on the whole thing. Let me know in the comments what you think about this game and tell me if there's any other games that you want me to cover. And like I said earlier, if you do enjoy this type of content, hit that like and subscribe. It'd really help out the channel. I'd really like to grow this channel doing more analytic content like this because it is something I'm very passionate about and do enjoy making. Either way, guys, hope you enjoyed. Stay safe out there and I'll see you in the next one.